Hello and welcome back to another Sportsnaut interview. I am Evan Grote and I'll be your host for this week's interview. And this week we are joined by Jason Fitz, who covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. And Jason, I know it's a busy week with the holidays. We appreciate you coming on and making some time for us today.
Heck yeah, no, I love it. Like, the holidays are all about work. When you work in this business, it's funny. Like, this is one of the busiest work weeks between the NFL and rivalry week in college football. None of us have time to breathe. So yeah, no, I love it. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right into it then. I want to go around the league with you and touch on a few NFL headlines following Week 11. We got some news today on Tuesday out of Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin finally deciding to make the move to move on from his offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. The fan base has been calling for this change for a long time now. It's been a while since the last time the Steelers made a in-season coaching move. In fact, it was 1941. I saw Adam Schefter tweet out today that's how long it's been. But do you think this is the right move by Tomlin to decide to move on from Matt Canada?
Yeah, but it's too late. I mean, I think this is the right move and it's effective, but one of the things that's happened through this entire process is whatever development we expected of Kenny Pickett, we haven't really seen. Now, I thought Kenny Pickett coming out was going to be okay, and it turns out he's been okay, but he looked great in the preseason. People bought into that hype train. Since the regular season started, he's looked like the same Kenny Pickett we've seen. The hard part for teams like the Steelers is you're going to have to look in the mirror and figure out, is Kenny Pickett better than the fifth best quarterback in next year's draft? Right now, I don't think the answer to that is yes. So, getting rid of Matt Canada is fine, but it's too little too late, and it's already thwarted the development of the most important position in all of sports. So, I feel like the Steelers are still behind the eight ball.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say too little, too late, because they are still very much alive in the playoff picture. I mean, they currently hold the seventh seed in the AFC right now at 6-4, clinging to that spot. And you're talking about Kenny Pickett and how much of a disappointment he has been. Do you think we could see more changes? And I'm talking about at the quarterback. Could we see Mason Rudolph, become the starting quarterback at some point for the Steelers this season?
I don't think they do that this season because they understand that ruins any chance they have long-term of making anything work. Look no further than Zach Wilson and how complicated that gets when you walk away from your young quarterback. But the funny thing is, you mentioned the record. I would challenge people to apply a little bit of the college football mindset to the NFL. If we actually look at the tape on the team and ask, hey, is this a good football team? The answer is top to bottom, no. There's a reason they've been outgained in every single game. This has been one of those years, and fine, it's better to be lucky than good. But they've been lucky, not good, and we had to acknowledge that last year with Minnesota. We have to acknowledge that with Pittsburgh right now. They're trying to fix their offense. I just don't know that anything they do now will actually fix their productivity on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't think their offense is going to end up being good enough to get them into the playoffs this year. So it's impossible for Tomlin to have a losing record, but they need to make change. I think the offseason is when they change their quarterback.
Yeah, and you talked about the Steelers offense just not being good enough this year. Currently ranked 28th in yards per game as well as points per game. So just not getting it done after a very good preseason, as you mentioned. I want to move over to Buffalo. We saw them make a change with their coordinator last week following their loss to the Broncos. At least after one game, it looks like a good move. That the offense kind of had an explosion there, 32 points against a really good Jets defense. But when you look at that Buffalo schedule, they've got a lot of work to do. They still have games against the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots, and the Dolphins. That is a very, very difficult schedule in what looks like a very crowded AFC playoff picture right now. What are some of your thoughts on the Bills' chances with that schedule of trying to get themselves into a playoff?
They've made it difficult on themselves, but I still think they're a playoff team. And here's what's interesting and why I think their offensive coordinator change is a little different. They have all the pieces. The pieces weren't being used well. I would argue the Steelers don't have all the pieces. I would argue the Bills do. The problem is a couple of things. Their offensive game plan seemed to be roll the ball out to Josh Allen and hope he can make something happen. And then they had one piece on the offensive side, throw the ball to Stephon Diggs and just pray that everything else works itself out. They've got to find a way to balance out. And that's where I think an offensive coordinator makes a huge difference in play calling and sort of your ability to be balanced in your approach, your discipline in that process. Don't just do what's easy. do what's the best for the overall game plan. I think that Buffalo can be more balanced as a football team, and as we get into this time of the year, the ability to do more than one thing becomes a huge key. Plus, you can make the argument that there are fatal flaws all across the AFC. Like the Ravens just lost their most important offensive player, not named Lamar Jackson, right? Like the Bengals don't have Joe Burrow. The Browns don't have a quarterback. The Dolphins have looked bad against good teams. Like there are fatal flaws all the way across the board. So I still think Buffalo is a playoff team. The question becomes, can they maximize once they get into the playoffs? And in this wide open AFC, why not them? I mean, there isn't a clear-cut front runner to me.
I agree with you. I think the AFC right now is as wide open as it has been in a number of years. So I think we're in for a good stretch run here, especially in the AFC. While we're on the topic of coaching changes, we just mentioned Matt Canada. He lost his job. Ken Dorsey last week lost his job. Just 3 weeks ago, I know you're a Las Vegas Raiders fan. They decided to move on from their head coach, Josh McDaniels. We are at that point in the season where the seats start to get a little bit warmer for some of these coaches. Is there one or two coaches out there that you can point your finger into and say, if things don't turn around quickly for them, they could be next on the chopping block?
I mean, Brandon Staley should already be fired. And I hate going after somebody's job. It feels so harsh to do it, but the abject disaster of what the Chargers have become, I don't understand how you can even survive that, right? So I feel like Brandon Staley's out. I feel like Eberflus is out. That's not a hot take either out in Chicago. Those are pretty easy. Sometimes we have a surprising firing, and the one that I'm looking at right now, wondering if by the end of the season it has run its course, is Mike Vrabel with the Tennessee Titans, because the Titans aren't as good as expected to me. Their offensive line coming in, we knew was going to be an issue. It's been an even bigger issue, but there also seems to be a fracture in the relationship between GM and coach, and some of what we're hearing about who's reporting what. Like, it just feels like behind the scenes there's enough smoke that I'm starting to wonder if there is fire to Vrabel being somewhere else next year. And if that happens, he becomes immediately a very, very hot candidate. I don't always know why. I think he's a little overcredited for what he's accomplished in Tennessee. I think that's a little bit of, being down on the Titans as a franchise and up on the coach. But Vrabel is somebody I would keep my eye out for a parting of ways at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. He honestly, that one hadn't crossed my mind because, again, he has had so much success recently while he's been with the Titans. I could not agree with you more with Brandon Staley. One thing I want to ask you about in relation to the Brandon Staley possibly not being with the team next year, I keep hearing these rumors, and of course this would take two coaches parting ways with their current team. It would take Brandon Staley leaving the Chargers and Bill Belichick no longer being the coach of the Patriots. I keep hearing rumors that there's a possibility that Belichick could land in Los Angeles with the Chargers if both teams are moving on from their coaches. I know you follow the AFC West closely. Is that the last place you'd like to see Bill Belichick end up?
No, bring him on. Like, see, here's the thing about Bill Belichick at this point. Everybody keeps talking about Belichick, where he's going to go. My question is, what version are we going to get? Because Bill Belichick, the coach, is untouchable. But we keep saying, well, his assistant coaches weren't good enough. Well, he hired them. Then we say, oh, the talent isn't good enough. Well, he drafted them. Like, Bill Belichick controls absolutely everything in that organization. I don't think he's going to go somewhere else and give up that control. So if he's going to give up control, why not stay where he is in New England, let other people come in and continue to coach? If he's actually going to give up full control, then we have another conversation. I don't think that happens. So if he goes to the Chargers, he's going to take over the front office. He's going to take over the hiring of absolutely everything, and he's going to run them into the ground. Like, Bill Belichick, the GM, Bill Belichick, the team president, is not good enough at his job. And Bill Belichick, the coach, has been having to make up for those deficiencies. But I don't think you can hire one without hiring the other. So I'll roll the dice all day, every day that Belichick changing locations will actually set a franchise back in the end.
Yeah. All good points there. Hard to argue that. One of the other big storylines coming out of Week 11 were some injuries. We saw Joe Burrow and Mark Andrews both suffer serious injuries. Joe Burrow out for the season. It looks like Mark Andrews is going to be out for the remainder of the season as well, both occurring on Thursday Night Football. And it's brought light to, a controversial topic, and that's the hip drop tackle. I know that there's been a lot of chatter, in NFL league circles that they're going to be looking to take a closer look at that play, the competition committee I'm talking about, and possibly banning that tackle from the game. I read Peter King's Football Morning in America article, and he suggests that he believes that the league is going to be very aggressive in looking to remove that play in the offseason. What is your take on the hip drop tackle and the possibility of the league looking to remove that play?
I think it's gone. And Diana Rossini told me a few weeks ago when I had her on one of my Yahoo Sports shows that she heard then that, it was already a big, big focal point. Anytime a move in football of any sort gets associated with injury to key players, now all of a sudden everybody takes a look at it. Let's be clear. If it's backups, if it's offensive linemen that are going down, nobody seems to care. But if it goes after skill position players or quarterbacks and it's something that people see over and over again, that impacts ratings. Like, go all the way back to, I think it was 2017 when the playoff ratings were way down and people wanted to make it about all sorts of things. It was because of Kaepernick and the flag and taking a knee and all of these things. And at the time when I was working for ESPN, we were making the joke, like, the reason ratings were down in the playoffs were all the quarterbacks remaining were people no one had ever heard of. Now, Nick Foles winning a Super Bowl turned out to be a really fun story, but that's not what gets gravitated ratings, right? People go to superstars. So the league will always protect superstars. It's why I laugh at Tom Brady sitting here saying that the NFL isn't the same NFL he played in. Well, that's in part because of him. He took one low hit as a quarterback, and all of a sudden the league said, can't lose Brady. So anytime we start losing big players and the league sees that, they will change the rules, and they don't care if they end up with video game football. We prefer video game football. And so you sit here and say, well, defensive players' jobs has never been tougher. Okay, then why has defense been winning for the majority of this season so far? Like, I realize it's not pretty football, but the NFL will always protect their superstars. I think the hip tackle is done. It is absolutely gone after this season.
Yeah, interesting take there. So do you think that, again, the NFL has changed and modified their rules, in my opinion, I think to kind of benefit not only player safety, of course, that's the logic behind it, but it seems like giving the offensive players an advantage. I've heard a lot of defensive players complaining. I heard Patrick Queen talking about this following the Ravens game, that we play a physical sport. We play a game that involves tackling. What are we supposed to do? So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that the defense is being put at a disadvantage if this hip drop tackle is to be removed from the game?
It's a temporary disadvantage because you got to learn how to approach things differently, right? So think about the number of things that a defensive player now has to think about anytime they're tackling. And sometimes you just know you're going to break the rules. Like a horse collar tackle is something that and there was a game earlier this year for the Raiders where Marcus Peters smartly dragged a guy down. It was a horse collar tackle, but it saved a touchdown, helped them win a football game, right? So a smart play to take the penalty on this. But just think about the number of things a player now has to think about when they're approaching a tackle. And then you add to that the fact that the NFL only allows 14 padded practices during the course of the entire regular season. Only 14 times will players put pads on. So now you got to think about, are you tackling too high? Are you tackling too low? Are you leading with your head? Are you going in with your shoulder? Are you coming from the right angle? Are you blocking from somewhere they can't see? Like all of these things that come into it, and you only get really 14 times a season to actually work on it in a real live action way. How can a defensive player ever not be at a disadvantage? So to me, all of these things come down to thinking. And when a football player is thinking, it's a problem. Now, in 3 years, when everybody's used to it, it's no issue at all. Everybody gets used to it. They're fine with it. But in a world, in your big movie voice, in a world where it's now become a real play to say, hey, I'm going to heave up a short pass deep, and I'm just going to hope the defensive player somehow interferes. Like, that's the new world we live in. Defensive players are always at a disadvantage. This will only magnify that for a year or two, and then it'll normalize.
Yeah. On Monday night, we saw a rematch of last year's Super Bowl between the Eagles and the Chiefs. The Eagles avenged that loss 21-17 on Monday night. If it wasn't for Marquez Valdez-Scantling dropping what I think would have been the game-winning touchdown there, although the Eagles would have had a chance to try to respond to that, I think the outcome would have been different for the Chiefs. But I've been saying this all year long. The Chiefs, to me, they don't look like the same Chiefs that the Chiefs of old that we have seen in the previous few years under Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. They just seem a little off right now. In fact, their offense is ranked 14th right now in points average per game. And I went back and looked. They haven't been below, I believe it was 5th with Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback. So there's definitely something going on with that offense. Do you think that they will be able to overcome some of the struggles that they've had on offense with the lack of talent at receiver and try to make another run at the Super Bowl this year?
I think so. Here's where things are curious, because no team in the NFL in history has scored less than the Chiefs have in the second half. That was covered ad nauseum last night, right? Like, they are getting beaten every possible way. But think about this. This is the crazy part. You mentioned last night there was a drop late that I think with you would have won that game. They had a loss where Patrick Mahomes had the flu and played absolutely terrible. Their other loss was when they were missing two of their most important players. Kelsey and Jones weren't in for week 1 against the Lions. Those are your 3 losses. So I agree with you that everything I look at with the Chiefs doesn't look like normal Chiefs, and it looks bad compared to what we're used to for Kansas City. But every one of their 3 games, there's a yeah but that exists with it. So in my mind, like, the funny thing is, I'm sitting here saying the Chiefs look broken, man. Oh, okay, 3 losses that are all excusable? Like, most teams, when they look broken at this point, would look like the Bills, who, are having a tougher time. So there is this moment for me where I hear all of that. It just happens to coincide with the time where the Chiefs' defense is playing great. Like, Raiders-Chiefs this weekend should be a defensive battle. And I can't believe I'm saying that about teams that take it on the Chiefs. This is going to be one of those games where 2 defenses make 2 offenses look ugly, and they hope that they just find a way to force more turnovers. The Chiefs are winning because their defense is playing top-notch. If their offense is even just mediocre in a game, Mahomes is going to make those 1 or 2 plays. They're still going to win football games, and they still have a very real shot at home field advantage. So, like, even when everything's broken, you're still going to have to go through Kansas City and beat this version of Mahomes. Like, I'm not counting them out.
Yeah, again, great points. And even with some of the struggles they are having, they're still currently the number 2 seed in the AFC. So, once they do maybe get over the hump here and get things rolling a little bit more on offense, they're going to be a dangerous team. I still believe that. I always say, as long as Patrick Mahomes has a pulse, they're always going to have a very good chance to win a game and be competitive. Before I get you out of here, I do want to end our conversation with one more question about your Las Vegas Raiders. I know you're passionate about them. They moved on from Josh McDaniels 3 weeks ago. It's a good story right now, a feel-good story right now with Antonio Pierce, the interim head coach. Of course, they did lose this past week. But, I keep hearing rumors that Mark Davis is going to give serious consideration to keeping Antonio Pierce on as the head coach. Again, after what we saw him do with Rich Bisaccia just 2 years ago, maybe in his mind making the mistake to bring on Josh McDaniels and not keep Bisaccia after he led the Raiders to the playoffs after that, all the drama and adversity they dealt with that season. But in your mind, what does Pierce have to do to retain the job? And do you think it would be the right move, or is there someone else out there that's on your radar to be the next Raiders head coach?
So I think he's got to be competitive against Kansas City. The Raiders still have 2 games left against Kansas City. He's got to be competitive. He cannot get blown out in any of these games. He doesn't have to beat Kansas City, but it has to look like Miami did, where it came down to the wire and you thought, man, I can't believe it. We were in this game. I think if he's competitive with Kansas City and doesn't get blown out anywhere, he's got a very real chance at the job. And part of that is because look at Mark Davis and the way he celebrated the Las Vegas Aces WNBA win, with the players dancing around, a part of the parade. Like, he wants to be a player's owner. He wants players to love him. And so I don't think it's an accident that you see him in the locker room with Max Crosby having cigars after the game. Like, if Max Crosby says, I want Antonio Pierce, and there's not a reason to say no, it becomes very easy for Mark Davis to say, yeah, we're going to do this the way you guys want. We're going to let the players sort of be the voice of reason in here. I think that's what he wants to do moving forward. Is that the right choice? Well, I mean, we live sort of in this new Deion Sanders world where certain guys that played the game know how to relate to certain guys, and that looks great when Colorado's winning, and it looks terrible when Colorado's not, right? So ultimately, as long as Antonio Pierce, he's like any other first-time head coach. He's going to be judged by the coordinators he brings in. So is he able to bring in an offensive coordinator that can make something out of this offense? Are they able to find a quarterback? Like the same things that any coach is going to have to face. I think there are going to be sexy names. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Lions. Jim Harbaugh, obviously, I think he's going to leave Michigan. I think he'll be back in the NFL. These are big names that people are going to have an eye on. I would look at it this way and say Antonio Pierce deserves every chance at a fair shot at the gig. If he's able to be competitive moving forward, he shouldn't get the gig without talking to other people, and he shouldn't lose the gig just because you want to talk to other people. Got to be fair and thorough in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insight and great analysis there by Jason Fitz, our guest this week, who covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. Jason, we thank you so much for the time and for joining us this week. Keep up all your great work and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, man. I appreciate you.